is sometimes we know we're about to, or we anticipate that we're moving into a difficult situation. Maybe we've got to meet the boss at work or someone, and we anticipate it's going to be a little bit challenging. So generally when that happens, we go in like this, on the defensive. And then of course they say some little provocative thing, and then poof, we react and they react, and it's a mess. So rather than this, when we're actually physically approaching the person, do this practice. Take their suffering and mental afflictions, give them happiness. That means then when we actually are about to talk to them, we're not doing this, but we're more open, loving kindness, compassion. So rather than reacting, we're more likely to respond in a better way in a difficult situation. So that's another thing that can be helpful. And another thing we can do is that, of course, in our modern life, we're very busy. And then sometimes we get stuck, like at the red light, in a traffic jam, in a queue. And then, of course, we get frustrated because I'm running late, I need to get somewhere, get out of my way. And we just get frustrated and irritated. So these are perfect opportunities to practice Tonglen. Because there are obviously other people stuck in the queue, in a traffic jam, at a red light. Take their frustrations, give them happiness. And so we can use this as an opportunity not to get frustrated, but to practice loving kindness and compassion. And then I think you'll find that these situations that really irritate us, rather than, they won't irritate us, and actually we'll be happy because we've got an opportunity where we don't have to do something, where we've got an opportunity for a few minutes or maybe longer to actually practice. So very good. Wonderful to get stuck in a traffic jam or a queue at a red light. We can sit there and practice. Fantastic. And then also, of course, when we ourselves have some sort of suffering, physical or mental, we can use this practice. Now, of course, what often happens, if we have some sort of unpleasant thing happening to us, then often we have this aversion. Go, oh, no, go away. But of course, our aversion, all that does is it magnifies the amount of suffering we experience many times. And actually this was demonstrated in a little scientific experiment they did recently. They had a group of people, and I think it was some sort of like heat pad that they had on their leg that was producing a lot of heat and it was quite painful. And they asked the participants to measure their level of pain from 0 up to 100. And they asked them to keep monitoring that. And also these participants had an intravenous drip in their arm. You want to know what that means? Intravenous drip? You know, in hospital when you get dehydrated? Yeah. And it was just like saline solution going in initially. So, you know, what they put in if you get dehydrated that's all. But they asked them, what's your level of pain? And the average response was 66. Then what they did in the experiment was they started introducing painkiller without telling them. They didn't tell them, but they started introducing it, and they kept asking them, what's your level of pain? And as you'd expect, it should go down. And yes, it did. It went from 66 to 55. Then they still kept giving them painkiller, so nothing changed, but now they told them they were getting painkiller. So nothing changed, but magically 55 went to 39. Now here's the interesting part. They kept giving them painkiller, but now they told them they're stopping the pain killing, expect pain. So nothing changed, but 39 went to 64. So we can see that a lot of their suffering was this aversion was inducing the suffering. And similarly, from my own experience, many years ago, when I first came into Buddhism, one of the very first things I did one of these Goenka retreats in India. And just before that retreat, I damaged my knee in a sporting accident. So it was quite painful to sit cross-legged. I could sit for maybe 15 or 20 minutes, and then after 15 minutes it started to hurt and I had to keep moving. But in this Goenka retreat, part way through the retreat, they introduced this idea of developing strong determination. That for 1 hour you were supposed to sit completely still and not move the body 1 millimetre to develop determination. So I was determined. And at that time the practice was to scan the body for sensations. This is a Vipassana practice. Actually, we're going to be doing this Day 8, actually. Day 8 in the evening. Not 9, 8. It was going to be a surprise, but now... So it's not all happening on 9. So anyway, the instructions were to scan for sensations. And part of the instruction was, if you get to a part of the body where there's strong sensations, just stay there a bit longer. So of course I was scanning down to the knee, and I mean it was like really overwhelming pain. And I got down to the knee, and if I had mindfulness and just watched, then that singular, solid, overwhelming pain started to break up into smaller chunks of pain, and then eventually it just divided up into thousands of intense sensations, which actually were sort of kind of pleasant. And so as long as I saw that, because that's the reality, that's what was there, intense sensations. As long as I could see that like that, I could sit there okay. I mean, it was signalling to me to attend to something, so I wasn't ignoring it, but I could sit with that. But as soon as my mindfulness went out and my mind goes, oh, that's pain, I don't like pain, go away, then it became overwhelming suffering, like nearly passing. It was really strong. So I saw from my own experience there that my aversion caused most of my suffering. Like 95% of my suffering was self-induced through aversion. So what we can do is, if we are experiencing some sort of physical or mental unpleasant experience, to avoid this aversion and magnifying our suffering is to practice what's called acceptance. But acceptance doesn't mean resignation. Acceptance simply means I'm experiencing this having this unpleasant experience in the present moment. I can either accept that fact or I can try to resist it. And resistance or aversion just magnifies. So through acceptance, we won't magnify discomfort through aversion. And then we can follow Shantideva's advice, who says, if a situation can be remedied, why get upset? Just fix it. And if a situation cannot be remedied, what's the point in getting upset? Doesn't help. So if we can fix it, we fix it. If we can't, it'll pass. And at least then we won't magnify suffering. But then there's something we can do in addition to that, and that's this Tonglen practice. And let's say, for example, we're experiencing a migraine headache. And of course, often if we have a migraine headache, we go, oh no, not that, go away, go away. And of course, when we do that, more suffering, much worse. Actually, before I finish the story, that reminds me of another story. Some years ago, when I was teaching a 10-day introduction course in India, there was a young lady from Canada. I think she was in her early 20s. And when she was, I think it was like 10 or 12, something like that, or around that age, I think she had some accident. And because of that, they had to fuse together some vertebrae in the neck. And because they fused the vertebrae together, she had restricted movement. But then from that time, she had pain all the time, non-stop. And then now that was like 10 years before, or 8 or 10 years before. And then she came to this course and she heard about this idea of mindfulness and just observing. And then she spoke to me after the course but she said it was about day 3 of the course or something like that. She said she were doing some mindfulness practice and she was just observing. And she said actually then for the first time since she had the fused vertebrae, she wasn't having any pain. I mean, she still had some restriction in movement. But what happened was, as a teenager, because of that, she was worried about impacting her life and she can't do all the things she'd like to do. And so that was causing constant pain. But she said from day 3, she had no pain. And up until when she talked to me at the end of the course. I mean, still there was some restriction, but she said she wasn't having any pain for the first time since they were fused. So this is because she wasn't having the aversion, she was just watching. But again, going back to the example then of the migraine headache, is, of course, if that sort of thing happens, normally we go, oh no, 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 and then it'll be just more suffering. So practice acceptance. And let's say that it's a case that through our experience, even if we take medication, it doesn't really help. We just have to sort of wait till it finishes. So then we just practice acceptance and go, okay, this will pass. But in addition to that, what we can do is use this Tonglen practice. We can make that difficult situation meaningful. And that is, we can do something like this. We can say, okay, I'm not the only person on the planet with a migraine headache now. There must be thousands of other people with migraine headaches, maybe much worse than me. So by me willingly accepting this migraine headache, may all others be free of their migraine headaches. So then we're breathing in all their migraine headaches and dissolving them and sending out happiness to them. And so then we're using that situation to cultivate loving kindness and compassion. And also, what you often find when we do that is that now, because we're really focusing on others, the level of discomfort reduces even more. Because it's usually when we're so pretty well self-absorbed, and that's often what happens when we have some unpleasant thing happen to us. We sort of contract and sort of absorb into ourselves and do this, and that's why we suffer so much. So therefore, by focusing on others, then acceptance is a lot easier. And then also, because we have this mind of loving kindness and compassion for them, that often even overwhelms a lot of the discomfort we may be experiencing. But at least we can use that as an opportunity to make it meaningful. So that's a few things we can do with Tonglen practice in daily life. We've got a few minutes left. Any questions?
When you were talking about the example of you scanning your body when you have this really, great pain in the knee, did you have to apply your mindfulness specifically on the knee to make it unpainful? Or could you continue to scan your entire body and still the pain was resolved? Or?
A little bit, but it was mainly I had to really pay close attention. Because if I wasn't... See, what happens is if you're not looking at it very clearly, you're just getting some signals there. And generally now when some sort of signals come, we interpret that based on our memories and experiences. And so if we're not really looking there closely, the mind will already start interpreting and go, oh, pain, I don't like that. Whereas if you're looking, then your discursive conceptual mind is a little bit more quiet and you're looking with this bare attention directly. So you're sort of reducing the likelihood of the conceptual mind interpreting, rather you're observing that directly. So my experience was that it was only really when I was looking at it very closely that it worked well. Sometimes when I was scanning, it was a little bit better than, if I wasn't. But for me, I needed to really be looking at it. But of course, if your mindfulness gets really well, then probably not.
Then you think that you can be able to scan your body and also
Yeah, I think so, because it's our discursive mind that is doing the.
Automatically.
Yeah.
It depends also on perspective. Because
Yeah, but-
when you run,
Sure.
there are a lot of things that are burning or paining, but the perspective attitude is that it's good for us.
Right,
So
but
it's-
often too, when you're doing a physical activity like running,
Yes.
you're focused on the running. So that sort
Yes,
of
right.
that all that thinking doesn't get. I mean, if you really started thinking, you'd probably go, oh no, body, pain. Whereas I think if you're just in the flow and focusing on the activity, then that often doesn't arise so much either.
It's happened to me also in Cuenca, in Dharamsala, 20 years ago. And I have a very strong pain. And after the fourth day, I decided I'm going away. I don't want to stay there anymore. It was kind of decision. And then I was observing, and suddenly it's vanished.
Yeah.
And then I stayed the whole day.
Good. Very good. Very
It's
good.
day number 4. It's day number 4.
Remember when I had this argument with myself in this kind of practice, because I remember that the instruction was okay, you can look at it.
In the Guenka you're talking now, the good scanning?
You can look at it for a few moments,
Yeah.
and then keep on.
Right.
And then I felt very like attached, because I couldn't move on. I felt that it's so I had this, and I don't
Sure.
think I got an answer. Like, am I supposed to, okay,
Right.
I'm looking at it, then like after 5 minutes I should go back scanning, or can I practice the whole meditation on this pain?
Yeah, I mean I mean, of course, just focusing on a pain for a whole session is something valid we can do. But remember that practice in Goenka is a Vipassana practice. It's not a practice of analysing pain. It's a Vipassana practice to come to realize impermanence of the body.
So when do you know that it's enough time and you can move on?
I mean, I don't think you need to have a timer, but the idea is that you really want to be scanning the whole body in a session. So if you're spending half the session there, you're not going to be able to complete the scan. So in that sense, but I mean, I think that, I mean, when I did it, I can't remember them saying stay there for X amount of seconds. They just say stay there a little longer and then move on. Okay, last question.
My mother, she was sick in cancer. She was 90. And I saw her sometimes after a very strong pain. She was just relaxed. And after she said, I give time to the pain, something like this. And then I saw her sitting. She doesn't know anything about Buddhism in this life. She was sitting, I thought she's sleeping, sitting on a chair and very quiet. And then when she opened her eyes, I asked her, did you sleep? She said to me, no. I said, so what you was thinking about? She said, about nothing. I said, what do you mean about nothing? All the time was thinking about something. She said, it's very simple. I let my mind, I make my mind quiet. This is what she said, not the brain. She said in Hungarian language. I was shocked. I said to her, listen, people are going 20, 30 years to get this point. And you say,
Maybe she was a hidden yogi.
I think so.
Maybe.
His Holiness was praying
Maybe.
for her every morning when she was sick.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, very nice. Very nice. Okay, it's time for a tea break now. So tea break, and then 3:45 again the yoga, and 5 o'clock come back and we'll continue the Shamatha practice.